My name is Jack Mitchell, and the night I found my wife and best friend together wasn't what destroyed me. It was finding their shared calendar with our divorce date already scheduled, 3 weeks before they'd planned to tell me anything. I still remember the exact moment my world collapsed, not when I caught them in bed, but 40 seconds later when I noticed the Denver real estate brochures scattered across my dresser and the moving company receipt in plain sight. That's when I realized I wasn't just being cheated on. 1:37 a.m. That timestamp is burned into my memory. After telling my wife Olivia I was at a teaching conference in Nashville, I quietly returned home to confirm what weeks of investigation had already revealed. Our 3-story craftsman was silent except for the faint melody of our wedding song drifting down from our bedroom. The song that played during our first dance as husband and wife. With each of the 17 steps up our staircase, my heart hammered harder against my ribs. The hallway seemed to stretch forever. The bedroom door slightly ajar with golden light spilling onto the carpet I'd helped Olivia pick out just last year. I paused at the threshold, hand trembling against the wood. These were the final moments of my old life, the last heartbeats of the man I used to be. I pushed the door open. The first things I noticed were the wine glasses on the nightstand, our wedding crystal that we only used on anniversaries. Then I saw them, Olivia and Nathan, tangled in our gray linen sheets, the ones her mother had given us last Christmas. Their expressions transformed from intimacy to horror in a heartbeat. Not the shock of being caught, but the panic of watching their carefully constructed plan collapse. "Jack," Olivia gasped, clutching the sheets. "You're supposed to be in Nashville." That's when I saw it all. The open suitcase on the floor filled with her favorite clothes, the Denver neighborhood maps on my dresser, and worst of all, her phone lying face up with a calendar notification clearly visible, final walkthrough, Westridge House, scheduled for 3 weeks later. They weren't just having an affair, they had engineered an entire future that completely wrote me out of existence. I'm a 34-year-old high school history teacher who coached basketball and believed in the people I loved. This isn't just another story about infidelity. This is about discovering that while I was grading papers and helping students plan their futures, my wife and best friend of 15 years were literally scheduling my replacement. Before I tell you how they systematically dismantled my life, you need to understand what they destroyed. Because betrayal isn't just about broken vows, it's about stolen history. I first saw Olivia Reed at the campus coffee shop during our sophomore year of college. For weeks, I ordered the same drink, vanilla latte, extra shot, before working up the courage to actually speak to her. When I finally did, she pulled out a stack of napkins she'd been saving, each one with tiny sketches she'd drawn for me, hoping I'd notice. After our first real conversation, she wrote her number on my cup with a small drawing of a coffee bean with eyes and the words, "Call me before this guy grows legs and walks away." Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it felt real. I proposed at that same coffee shop 3 years later, now under new management, but still ours. When she said yes, an elderly couple at the next table bought us champagne and told us they'd been married 52 years. "A secret," the old man whispered, "is to never stop seeing the magic in ordinary days." We promised each other we would remember that. Our wedding in her parents' Virginia backyard remains one of my most treasured memories. Cherry blossoms everywhere, her father crying as he walked her down the aisle, and Nathan, my best friend since 10th grade, standing beside me as best man, discreetly handing me a tissue when I needed it most. Nathan and I had been inseparable since 10th grade chemistry class when we accidentally set fire to our textbooks and had to share one for the rest of the year. We were college roommates, weekend basketball partners, the kind of friends who didn't need to call before showing up at each other's doors. When my father died suddenly during my second year of teaching, Nathan came to my house every day for weeks, helping me write the eulogy when grief had stolen my words. Brothers don't need the same blood, he once told me, during those dark days. Just the same heart. The irony of those words now feels like another layer of betrayal. Our life in Atlanta became the gathering place for friends. Sunday dinners where Olivia would dance barefoot in our kitchen while making pancakes, her dark hair swinging, flowers smudged on her cheek. Nathan always brought the wine, usually a Cabernet he knew Olivia loved. The three of us formed what I thought was an unbreakable bond. We rented a cabin in the Smoky Mountains every October. Nathan and I played basketball on Wednesday nights, while he and Olivia discovered a shared passion for independent films. I was grateful they got along so well. How lucky am I? I remember telling my mother that my best friend and my wife love each other too. I'd had no idea that those connections were forming a triangle that would eventually exclude me entirely. Looking back now, I see how I created the perfect environment for their betrayal, encouraging their friendship, celebrating their common interests, never suspecting that my trust was being used against me. That's the thing about betrayal from those closest to you. They know exactly how to exploit your blind spots because they helped create them. The changes were subtle at first. So subtle, I questioned my own perception. That's how gaslighting works best, when you do it to yourself. Around January, Olivia started wearing perfume I didn't recognize for what she called client meetings that increasingly fell on weekends. Her normally casual style shifted to more polished outfits and elaborate hairstyles. When I complimented her effort, telling her, "You look amazing," that client doesn't stand a chance. Her smile tightened in a way I couldn't interpret then, but understand perfectly now. Her phone became an extension of her hand and a barrier between us. I'd catch her smiling at text messages, but the screen would angle away when I approached. Once, I glimpsed Nathan's name before the phone disappeared into her pocket. "Just asking about your birthday gift," she explained. My birthday was 7 months away. Late-night calls migrated to our back porch, her voice dropping to whispers that dissolved into the evening air. "Just work drama," she'd say when I asked. "Nothing worth boring you with." Her schedule grew increasingly unpredictable. Creative emergency at work became a common excuse for returning home hours after her normal time. Her cheeks flushed, eyes bright with an energy that never translated to our conversations. Meanwhile, Nathan's behavior shifted too. His questions about my schedule became oddly specific. When was my next basketball tournament? How long would parent-teacher conferences last? Would I be chaperoning the overnight field trip to Washington, D.C.? He began suggesting activities that would take me out of town. "You should really visit that photography exhibit in Savannah," he insisted, repeatedly. "Make a weekend of it. You work too hard, man." I now understand he wasn't concerned about my work-life balance. He was creating opportunities. Our Wednesday basketball games, a tradition we've maintained for years, began collapsing under last-minute cancellations. His excuses were always plausible, but increasingly frequent. Client deadlines, a persistent shoulder injury that miraculously healed whenever he helped Olivia rearrange our furniture. As a man raised in Georgia, I'd been taught that voicing relationship concerns was controlling or insecure, so I pushed these thoughts away, gaslighting myself into believing everything was fine. But something felt wrong, like walking into your own home and finding all the furniture moved slightly. Nothing obviously out of place, but the spatial memory no longer matches reality. The moment that cracked my denial happened at my colleague Jim's 50th birthday. As our friend group's unofficial photographer, I was taking pictures throughout the evening. The next day, reviewing them, I noticed a frame that stopped my breath. Olivia and Nathan in the background, partially obscured by other guests. His hand rested on the small of her back, not for balance or to get her attention, but with the casual possessiveness of established intimacy. Her body leaned into his, their foreheads nearly touching as they spoke. That single image shattered my complacency. I stared at it for hours, zooming in, studying the familiarity in their posture. I recognized the expression on Olivia's face, a soft, open vulnerability I thought was reserved for moments alone with me. That photograph wasn't just evidence of an affair. It was proof that while I had been living in one reality, an alternate universe had been forming right beside me, one where the two people I trusted most had created a connection that explicitly excluded me. But a suspicious photo wasn't enough. I needed to know how deep this betrayal went. And what I discovered next would redefine what betrayal actually means. That photograph transformed me from a trusting husband into a reluctant detective in my own marriage. I began noticing patterns in their absences that aligned with suspicious precision. Olivia's yoga classes that left no sweat on her clothes. Nathan's work emergencies that coincided perfectly with my late-night coaching sessions. They weren't just stealing moments. They were constructing parallel lives in the negative space of mine. I broke my own moral code on a Tuesday night and checked our phone records. The evidence wasn't just concerning, it was staggering. Hundreds of texts exchanged during my basketball practices. Hour-long calls that started minutes after I left for weekend tournaments. More communication between them in a week than Olivia and I had in a month. The first undeniable proof came when Olivia left for what she called a 3-day design workshop in Savannah. I checked the location sharing app we'd set up years earlier for travel safety. Her blue dot pulsed not in Savannah, but at the Westfield Hotel, 17 minutes from our house. I drove there in a fugue state, hands gripping the wheel so tightly, my knuckles blanched white. In the hotel parking lot, I spotted Nathan's silver Audi, the one I'd helped him pick out last year. I sat paralyzed in my car for 73 minutes. I remember checking the time obsessively, as if documenting this moment would somehow make it less surreal. I didn't confront them that night. Some survival instinct kept me rooted, knowing I needed to understand the full scope of their betrayal before facing it. Instead, I drove to an all-night diner where the waitress refilled my coffee without asking, perhaps recognizing the look of a man whose world was dissolving. I sat until sunrise watching normal people having normal nights, wondering how the universe continued functioning when mine had just imploded. But the hotel incident was just the beginning. 2 weeks later came the smoking gun that transformed this from a simple affair into something far more devastating. Olivia had forgotten to log out of her email on our shared iPad, the tablet we kept in the kitchen for recipes and streaming shows. A notification appeared from a Denver real estate agent thanking Olivia and Nathan for touring properties and suggesting additional homes that matched their criteria. Denver, a city 1,400 miles from Atlanta, a place where we had no connections, no history, no reason to consider moving. With trembling hands, I opened the email thread and discovered dozens of exchanges dating back 4 months. They had toured 3-bedroom homes in upscale neighborhoods, with excellent school districts and home office potential. Another folder contained job applications and offers. Olivia had accepted a senior design position at a major Denver agency. Nathan had confirmed a development role at a tech startup in the same neighborhood. They had calculated everything: salary comparisons, cost of living adjustments, health insurance options. Their new life had spreadsheets, actual spreadsheets with color coding and multiple tabs. The most devastating message was from Nathan to Olivia, sent just 3 days earlier. When is the right time to tell Jack? After the school year? I hate seeing him every day knowing what's coming. The guilt is eating me alive. But I can't wait to start our real life together. Our real life. As if the 8 years of marriage Olivia and I had built, the 15-year friendship Nathan and I had shared, were merely prologues to the authentic story they were about to begin without me. In Olivia's email drafts, I found a half-written resignation letter dated for June, timed perfectly for the end of my teaching year, minimizing disruption to their lives while showing zero consideration for mine. In messages to the real estate agent, Nathan mentioned starting fresh, where nobody knows our complicated history. They had even discussed which mutual friends they would maintain contact with after leaving. They hadn't just planned to cheat. They had planned to vanish, leaving me with an empty house and unanswered questions. The surgical precision of their exit strategy was almost impressive in its callousness. The discovery physically transformed me. I lost 12 pounds in 11 days. Dark circles formed under my eyes. My department chair pulled me aside, concerned about my health. Yet somehow I maintained the performance of normalcy. Grading papers, coaching games, sitting across from Olivia at dinner, knowing she was omitting the Denver job offer, the house hunting, the future she was building, that explicitly excluded me. I watched Nathan stop by with beer, discussing March Madness predictions, acting like he hadn't systematically betrayed every aspect of our friendship. In those moments, I realized I was living with strangers wearing familiar faces, people capable of compartmentalizing their betrayal so completely that they could still look me in the eye and ask about my day. I needed irrefutable evidence. I needed the perfect moment. Not for revenge, but for closure. For a truth so complete, they couldn't possibly deny what they had done. So I formulated a plan that would force them to confront the reality of their betrayal and show me exactly who they had become. I told Olivia I had a mandatory teaching conference in Nashville that weekend. I packed a suitcase with deliberate care, kissed her cheek, and texted when I arrived at the hotel. Then I circled back, parking behind the neighborhood grocery store, and waited. 47 minutes after my departure, Nathan's silver Audi pulled into our driveway. I gave them 2 hours, time enough to settle into their betrayal, to believe they were safe in our home. Walking back felt surreal, as if I were moving through someone else's life, rather than approaching the collapse of my own. The key turned silently in the lock. Inside, I heard music drifting down from our bedroom. The playlist I'd created for our anniversary 3 years ago. John Legend's All of Me, our first dance song, was playing as I climbed the stairs. Each step felt like moving through molasses, time stretching and distorting around me. At the top, light spilled from our partially open bedroom door. I could hear Olivia's gentle laugh, once my favorite sound in the world, now a dagger between my ribs. I stood there, hand on the doorframe, gathering strength for what came next. Then I pushed the door open. They were in our bed, the gray linen sheets tangled around them. But it wasn't their physical betrayal that gutted me. It was the evidence of their comfort, their ownership of my space. Nathan's watch on my nightstand, Olivia's favorite wine, the Cabernet we discovered on our honeymoon, open on the dresser. A half-packed suitcase in the corner, filled with items I recognized from our closet. On the nightstand lay printouts of Denver neighborhoods, moving company quotes, school district ratings, the physical manifestation of their digital betrayal, now impossible to deny. "Jack," Olivia gasped, clutching the sheet to her chest. "You're supposed to be in Nashville, and you're supposed to be my wife," I replied, my voice eerily calm. Funny how neither of those things is true. Nathan started to rise. "Jack, man, we can explain." "Explain what?" "Your new job's in Denver? The house on Westridge Avenue with the perfect home office space? How long you've been planning to disappear from my life?" The color drained from their faces. The word Denver hit them like a physical. "How did you—" Olivia began. "Does it matter?" I cut her off. "While I was teaching kids about the Civil War and coaching basketball, you two were creating spreadsheets about your new life. You had color-coded timelines about whether to tell me before or after the school year ended." I walked calmly to the closet, reached behind Olivia's winter coats, and pulled out the blue folder I'd discovered days earlier. I tossed it onto the bed between them. Inside were their meticulous research materials. The paper tray. "You didn't just cheat," I said, each word precise and measured. "You were engineering my erasure." Olivia began to cry, those tears I once found moving now seeming performative and hollow. Nathan stared at the folder, unable to meet my eyes. "Jack, we were going to tell you," he finally said. "We just didn't know how." "When?" I asked. "Before or after you changed your addresses? Before or after you enrolled in Denver Health Insurance? There's a moving company booked for June 15th. Were you going to mention it before then?" Their faces registered shock, then shame. They had been so careful in their planning, yet never considered that their digital footprint would lead right back to me. "I don't want explanations or apologies," I continued, surprising myself with my composure. "I came because I needed to see for myself what 15 years of friendship and 8 years of marriage actually meant to both of you." "We never meant to hurt you," Olivia whispered, the absurdity of her statement hanging in the air between us. "And yet hurting me was fundamental to your plan," I replied. "You designed an entire future where I simply didn't exist. Tell me, was any of it real? Or was I just occupying space until something better came along?" Neither could answer. In their silence lay the only truth I need. "You've hurt me," I said finally, my composure beginning to crack. "But you haven't broken me. I hope Denver is everything you dreamed it would be." I turned and walked out, down those 17 stairs, each step lighter than the last. In my car, the trembling began, violent shudders that made it nearly impossible to grip the steering wheel. But beneath the pain pulsed something unexpected: relief. The lies were over. The truth, however devastating, was finally in the open. That night, alone in an anonymous hotel room with generic artwork and stiff sheets, I felt both destroyed and strangely liberated. The two people I had trusted most had betrayed me in the most profound way possible. But at least now I knew exactly who they were and who I needed to become to survive this. That first night in the hotel, grief hit me in waves that threatened to drown me. I cried until my throat was raw, until my eyes burned, until dehydration headache pounded at my temples. I cried for the marriage I thought I had, for the friendship I'd treasured, for the future that had been methodically dismantled behind my back. I questioned everything, not just our relationships, but my own judgment, my worth, my ability to recognize truth from performance. Had Olivia ever truly loved me? Had Nathan ever been a genuine friend? Were there signs I'd missed for years? Was I so fundamentally unworthy that the two people closest to me could discard me so easily? As a Southern man, you're raised with certain expectations about masculinity. Real men don't break down. They don't show vulnerability. They protect what's theirs. I felt like I had failed at the most basic level. Failed to keep my wife's love. Failed to recognize betrayal from my best friend. failed to secure my own home and marriage. The shame almost eclipsed the pain. In that hotel room, I felt utterly worthless. Not just unloved, but unworthy of love. Not just betrayed, but deserving of betrayal. The practical matters created a bizarre counterpoint to my emotional collapse. In the weeks that followed, I moved through necessary tasks with robotic precision. Meeting with a lawyer who spoke gently, as if to someone terminally ill. Filing divorce papers. Arranging for my brother to accompany me to collect essential belongings while Olivia was at work. Explaining to my principal that I needed personal leave without completely falling apart in his office. Our social circle fractured along lines I never anticipated. Some friends rallied around me with casseroles and invitations that I mostly declined. Others seemed uncomfortable, unsure which side to take. A few actually suggested I shared responsibility. Marriages don't collapse overnight, Jack. Maybe if you'd been more attentive. These things happen when people feel trapped. The most painful response came from Brian, a colleague I thought understood me. You should have confronted them right there, thrown his clothes out the window, shown some backbone, as if violence would somehow restore my dignity, as if my measured response signaled weakness rather than self-preservation. Men are expected to respond to betrayal with rage, with territorial aggression. My choice to walk away with as much dignity as I could muster confused people. It didn't fit the script of masculinity they expected me to follow. 6 weeks after the confrontation, I reached my lowest point. Standing on my new apartment balcony, 18 floors up, I looked at the city lights below and thought how easily it would all end if I simply stepped over the railing. The constant ache in my chest, the humiliation that followed me into every room, the replaying of memories now poisoned by knowledge of their betrayal. All of it could stop in one moment of surrender to gravity. What saved me wasn't heroic willpower, but simple coincidence. My phone rang, pulling me back from the edge both literally and figuratively. It was Marcus, a childhood friend who'd moved to Seattle years ago. He'd heard what happened through our old high school network and called to check in. We talked for 3 hours. He shared his own experience with betrayal years earlier, different circumstances, but the same core pain. He didn't offer platitudes or toxic advice about getting even. He just listened, validated my experience, and told me something I desperately needed to hear. This isn't about your worth, Jack. Their choices reflect their character, not your value. That call became my lifeline. The first time someone had given me permission to feel the full depth of my pain without judging me for it. It offered the first glimmer of possibility that I might eventually find my way back to some version of myself I could recognize. And it was the moment I realized that surviving betrayal would require me to rebuild myself from the foundation up. My journey back to myself began when I acknowledged a truth that contradicted everything I'd been taught about masculinity. I couldn't do this alone. I started seeing Dr. Lenora Chen, a therapist specializing in betrayal trauma. During our first session, when I apologized for breaking down, she said something that altered my perspective. Your tears aren't a sign of weakness, Jack. They're evidence of your capacity for deep connection. That's a strength, not a failure. Those weekly sessions became sacred space, the only place where I could express the full magnitude of my pain without filtering it through societal expectations of how a man should grieve. Dr. Chen helped me understand that my pain didn't make me less of a man. It made me human. I had to unlearn toxic ideas about manning up or seeking revenge. True strength wasn't in suppressing emotions, but in facing them honestly. At Dr. Chen's suggestion, I joined a support group for men experiencing relationship betrayal. In that room, among strangers who understood exactly what I was feeling, I found unexpected brotherhood. Men from all backgrounds sharing stories of heartbreak and resilience. A construction foreman whose wife left him for his brother. An ER doctor whose partner had a second family in another state. A college student who discovered his girlfriend and roommate had been together for months. Some were further along in their healing than others, offering living proof that the pain wouldn't always be this intense. The oldest member, a 72-year-old retired judge, said something I carry with me. Your value didn't decrease because of their inability to see it. What they did says nothing about your worth and everything about their character. Physical activity became my daily medication. I started running at dawn, pushing my body to exhaustion. There was something purifying about physical pain, a counterbalance to emotional agony that temporarily quieted my mind. I joined a basketball league across town where nobody knew my story. For those 2 hours on the court, I existed only in the present moment, focused entirely on movement and breath. 4 months after the confrontation, I rediscovered photography with a transformed perspective. Instead of landscapes, I began capturing moments of unexpected resilience. A mural on a flood-damaged building, an elderly man teaching his grandson to ride a bike, construction workers rebuilding after a storm. I called the collection After Destruction, finding metaphors for my own rebuilding in each frame. The sale of our house, the home I had thought we'd raise children in, was both wrenching and liberating. Every object I kept or discarded became a decision about my identity. What belonged to old Jack, the trusting husband and friend? What belonged to new Jack, the man still discovering who he might become? Gradually, I formed deeper connections with people who demonstrated integrity through consistent actions rather than empty words. I became more explicit about my values, more protective of my trust, while still leaving myself open to genuine connection. The betrayal had taught me to look for character rather than charm, to value consistency and honesty above familiarity or history. 1 year after discovery, I held my first photography exhibition at a local gallery. The theme was reinvention, images documenting transformation and renewal. At the opening, surrounded by new friends and supportive old ones who had stood by me, I realized I had created a life that was entirely my own, different than what I had planned, but increasingly authentic and meaningful. The most profound lesson was about forgiveness, not for them, but for myself. I had to forgive myself for not seeing the signs earlier, for trusting too completely, for the dark thoughts I'd had in the aftermath. That self-forgiveness didn't happen overnight. It came gradually, in quiet moments of compassion toward myself, in recognizing that being deceived doesn't make you foolish. It simply makes you human. It's been 2 years since I walked into my bedroom and discovered my life wasn't what I thought. Olivia and Nathan did move to Denver, though not to the perfect house on Westridge Avenue they'd researched together. Their relationship imploded 6 months after relocating. Betrayal, it turns out, isn't solid foundation material. I take no satisfaction in their failure. That kind of schadenfreude would only poison whatever healing I've managed to achieve. I'm seeing someone now, Claire, a marine biologist I met unexpectedly when we were seated at the same table at a friend's wedding. Our connection developed slowly, built on radical honesty and clear boundaries. I told her my story early on, not as a warning or to elicit sympathy, but because it's part of who I am now. Her response showed me what genuine empathy looks like. The experience taught me what I truly need in a relationship. Not just affection, but integrity, transparency, and consistent respect. With Claire, I found something I never had with Olivia: complete emotional safety. We're moving at our own pace, building something authentic rather than following expected relationship timelines. Teaching remains my anchor. I've been nominated for Teacher of the Year at my school, largely because of a new curriculum I developed, connecting historical resilience to personal growth. My own experience with betrayal and recovery has made me more attuned to my students' emotional lives, more aware of the invisible struggles behind practiced smiles. When a student stayed after class to confide that his parents were divorcing, I could offer genuine understanding rather than empty platitudes. If you're watching this and you're in the middle of your own betrayal story, I want you to know something it took me months of therapy to truly believe. This pain won't define you unless you let it. Yes, it changes you. Yes, it leaves scars. But those changes and scars can become sources of wisdom and strength if you're willing to do the hard work of healing, for men especially. Your worth isn't determined by someone else's choices. The cultural pressure to be stoic, to react with aggression, to take it like a man, those expectations can prevent real healing. Find safe spaces to express your pain. Seek professional help. Connect with others who understand. There's no right way to process betrayal that conforms to arbitrary standards of masculinity. Healing isn't linear. Some days still blindside me. A song plays on the radio, or I drive past our old favorite restaurant and the pain resurfaces like a rogue wave. But those moments become less frequent, less overwhelming. They no longer define my days. Have you experienced betrayal? Share your story in the comments. You're not alone in this. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. If this video helped you, hit subscribe for more real conversations about life's toughest moments. Next week, I'll share the specific steps I took to rebuild confidence after betrayal. Remember, you're stronger than you think. Trust can be rebuilt. Love can be found again. And the life waiting for you on the other side of betrayal might be more authentic and fulfilling than you can imagine right now. Thank you for listening to my story.